All right. Today, the last lecture of the semester, I'm very happy to have a debate for the state Senate seat representing Berkeley and the East Bay area outside of Berkeley, Oakland, and the other side of the tunnel. We have the two main candidates. In fact, are you the two only candidates, or are there a couple other people on the ballot that are not going to win in the primary? Okay. So one of these two people today will be the state senator, and a huge improvement over our current state senator, and I can say that honestly, whoever should win today's race. The two candidates are Wilma Chan, who, okay, that came from the next mayor of Berkeley. It's a whole nother story. Who served 6 years in the Assembly and is now a candidate for state Senate, and Lonnie Hancock, okay, who is currently in the state Assembly and was formerly mayor of Berkeley. And by the way, I apologize again for last week. Ross Mercarimi showed up at 4:59. I hung in there and we talked for 5 minutes. He apologized. He said there was an accident. And anyway, he's very sorry about that. So maybe he'll come in the future. We'll see. Okay, without further ado, we flipped a coin, and Assembly member Lonnie Hancock will speak first. Each speaker is going to go for about 15 minutes. Then we'll take your questions. Please welcome Assembly member Lonnie Hancock.
Thank you very much, Alan. And I'm just delighted to see all of you here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about politics. Thank you for wanting to be involved. I don't know if there are any Cal Dems here, but I suppose I should thank the Cal Dems for their endorsement. And you guys are wonderful. And we just, I've served Berkeley for a long time. I started long ago on the Berkeley City Council, and later was the mayor. And after that, I served, before I was in the Assembly, I served for 7 years working for Bill Clinton, heading up the regional office of the U.S. Department of Education. And in doing that, worked a lot with Cal students again and with education. You guys are wonderful. You give so much and you add so much energy and idealism to what happens in this part of the world, which is probably the most forward-looking part of California and really, I would say, on the face of the earth. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, what I do in the Assembly, what I want to do in the Senate. I ran, actually, for the State Assembly because the immediate impetus was a concern about the fact that George Bush had refused to sign the Kyoto Accord. And it was clear we were going to be the only industrialized nation in the world that didn't recognize the threat of global warming and didn't intend to do something about it. And sitting reading the paper, I realized that folks had been talking to me about running for the Assembly. I'd just left the Clinton administration. There was no Gore administration, unfortunately. And realized that we didn't have to just sit around and wait in California. We were, at the time, the 5th largest economy in the world. Now we're the 6th largest economy in the world. And we actually could, as a state, take an action that would lead the United States and that would at least begin to show responsibility, creativity, and a way to save this beautiful state of California. So I also wanted to continue working on the education programs that I've been working on in the Clinton administration. So I found myself in the State Assembly and feel that I have been very privileged there. Privileged to raise some of the big ideas, because what I do see the role of people from this part of California as being, and from this district, especially the 14th Assembly District. It goes from Richmond down to just a little piece of Oakland, but Berkeley, Emeryville, and then over the hills into Orinda, Moraga, Lafayette, and Pleasant Hill, if any of you are from the suburban communities out there. But we can raise the big ideas. the ideas that turn the ship of state even a little bit in one direction or another. And you know, as they say in navigation, if you're going this way and you just turn it a little bit, you end up in a totally different place. So it matters that we do that. And then also pass the good bills that make people's lives a little better right here, right now, every day. And then, as I found, we also respond to emergencies. So example, in the latest, when we had the oil spill last November, my Natural Resources Committee was able to rally, hold oversight hearings, get a package of bills in which every legislator from the North Bay area here had a bill, and we co-authored each other's bills, and we're going to make sure that we do everything possible to make sure that that oil spill never happens again. If it does, we respond a whole lot better and a whole lot faster, and that we repair the environmental damage that was done. So we do the big ideas, we do the bills, we respond to the urgent things that happen in the state of California. And I'm running for the Senate now because I feel that I'm right in the middle of a lot of that work. 6 years isn't very long before being term limited out of the state legislature. I did find myself chairing the Natural Resources Committee in the State Assembly. I was a co-author of AB 32, as were many legislators. It originated in the committee. We shepherded it through to a governor's signature, but only after a lot of negotiation, And what my committee does now is we oversee the implementation of that critical bill that will allow us to essentially meet the Kyoto Accords, not to get 9% below where we were in 1990 by 2020, but just to get to 1990. To do that is going to be very, very hard. We have to do more than talk green. We have to do things that take carbon out of the air. And our oversight process has been interesting and sometimes very contentious. When Bob Sawyer, the chair of the Air Resources Board, was fired by the governor because he had the temerity to suggest an additional early action measure to the only 3 that had been adopted out of the 77 that were proposed initially. When he was fired, we held hearings. And as a result, we got Mary Nichols, who was a good environmentalist, put in that job. And now we have something like 17 early action measures. Not enough, but we're making a beginning. What I have come to see, though, is that in saving the planet, if you will, in turning around global warming, if we are serious about doing this, there is going to be an economic boom in this state, the likes of which we can only imagine. And I will tell you that this university and this area are going to be right in the middle of it. The labs at UC, the peer program, Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, some of the R&D that's going on in places like Emeryville are going to be where the next generation of technology is developed and where it's going to be, I hope, manufactured, shipped around the world. And what I want to see is not only that our area is right in the middle of that economic development, but that every single person, not only you guys, because frankly, you guys, the sky's the limit for you. You're in an elite university. You may be wondering if you're going to be saddled with debt when you get out of it, but that's another topic. But you're getting a great education. You know, we have a 30% high school dropout rate in California. And for many of those young people in places that I represent, like Richmond, like Oakland, there is very little stable economic future for them. A lot of them are on the street corners becoming a danger to themselves and others. And I want to see a good job in this green economy for every one of them too, because that is the way we thrive as a society. And I have been very active in the Assembly on the Education Committee, which I've served on for all the years I've been there. And there is something called career technical education, which is career exploration in small high schools with a lot of personal attention, that really has been shown through research to keep kids in school and prepare them for jobs. Actually, I worked when I was mayor in Berkeley. We started a biotech academy with Bayer Chemical right at Berkeley High School. It's that kind of thing. I was able to pass legislation that will put about $600 million a year into this kind of education so that we can lower the dropout rate and prepare our kids for the jobs of the future. I have a bill this year that would put in 10 green technology pilot academies. And the co-sponsors of that bill are the Apollo Alliance, one of the most forward-looking environmental groups, and the State Building Trades Association. So we got a great combination of people working together for the next generation, for our kids, and for the green economy. I've also done a lot of other bills, many of them brought to me by people in the district. A landmark brownfield cleanup bill that came to me from some environmental justice groups in Richmond, California, where cleanup of a toxic waste site was being done in a way that was very dangerous, and they were planning to build housing and have fans in the basement in perpetuity to blow the toxic fumes out of the basement. Everybody, including the developer, agreed the toxic fumes would be coming out of the ground. We were able to change that, and then after 3 years of fighting, write state law so that it will never happen in any other place. A bunch of kayakers brought me the idea for the San Francisco Bay Water Trail. That's been signed by the governor. It's being implemented by BCDC. We want everybody, regardless of income, to be able to get out on that bay and see it from the water as well as from the land and from the Bay Trail. $100 million written into the bond for green schools. We want to get all the new school buildings that are built green. And one of the bills most important to me was some victims of domestic violence came to me, and we were able to set up something called the Family Justice Center for victims of domestic violence. Everything from a doctor to a DA to a help in finding a place to be if you're a victim. But actually today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about something I'm working on a lot right now, which is the state budget. This was supposed to be the year of education. It's not. It's the year of talking about money, everybody. And it's a year when we are going to need the help of all of you and of every group of people who care about the future of the state of California. You probably read in the paper today that the governor now says maybe we'll have a $20 billion deficit in our state budget. We started out with supposedly a $12 billion budget. $6 billion of cuts to health and human services and education were made in the middle of the year. I could see what was coming. I voted against those cuts. I voted alone against the education cuts among Democrats. Another colleague joined me to vote against the health and human service cuts. Now all of our colleagues are rallying to the position that this cannot be a cuts-only budget. We will not do it. But many of you may not know that we have a lot of problems in getting from here to there. California is one of 4 states in the United States that require a 2/3 vote to pass a state budget. Congress doesn't do that. 50% plus 1 gets you a national budget. California is one of the few states that requires a 2/3 vote also to increase taxes, but allows you to lower taxes with a simple majority. What this has led to is less and less money, and we now have a situation where the Republicans in the legislature have signed a pledge, all but one, that they will raise no more money. If that happens, cuts to the university, $4.4 billion cuts to K-12 education at a time when we're 47th in the nation in what we spend per child in our public school system. All of these things will happen. We can turn it around. I am authoring a bill, for example, that would restore the 11% tax bracket on the wealthiest individuals, people making over $250,000 a year. They can actually even subtract that from their federal income tax. It would bring in about $6 billion a year. So we, as Democrats, are working very, very hard to make sure everybody understands our issues. We need 7 Republicans in the Assembly. We need 2 Republicans in the state Senate. And that, if we do that, we can start to rebuild our state and keep it a place where people can thrive. So I'm very happy to be endorsed in this election, in addition to the Cal Dems, by Congresswoman Barbara Lee, our great, courageous Congresswoman, the Sierra Club, California Nurses Association, the teachers, the California Democratic Party. I would like to just invite you all. Alan says you should be invited to take part in campaigns. Do. They're fun. You walk, you talk, you put in lawn signs, you argue about issues. And we would love to see you there. And I look very much forward to working with you and for you in Sacramento and working on some of these very, very important issues. Global warming, the budget, educating every one of our kids, building the green economy that truly, truly can fulfill the promise of California for all of us. So thank you very much.
Okay. Definitely, I hope that many of you will get involved in these campaigns because the election's the first week of June. What's the actual date? June 3rd, which is not far away. So after finals are over, if you have a few weeks while you're still in the area, it would be fantastic to get involved. Can you get extra credit? Can the students get extra credit? See me. All right, now I'd like to introduce Wilma Chan, who served 6 years in the Assembly representing Oakland, the neighboring district.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be back here. I'm actually teaching at Cal right now, and I see some of my students here, so I'm really happy to be here. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my background and kind of why I've been serving in public office for the past 17 years and why I want to go back. I was termed out last year, so actually I've been out of office for 1.5 years, and it's been a very interesting experience for me. I'm originally from Boston. I'm the parent of Chinese immigrants who came to this country during World War II. My dad actually was stationed at Richmond. He was drafted into the Army when he was here. And when I grew up in Boston, I faced a lot of discrimination as a young person. We were in the generation where when we tried to buy a house, my parents were turned away. And we were in the generation that when I walked to school every day, my sister and I used to get teased all the time. And there were very few role models at that time for young people and for Asian Americans, particularly for people of color. But it made me feel very much that in my adult life, and it wasn't like a straight line, but as I got older, it made me feel very much in my adult life that what I wanted to do was to make a difference for young people. And to never have young people who were in a situation where they felt that they couldn't choose what they wanted to do, whether it was to go into politics, whether it's to be a doctor, a lawyer, an actor, whatever it is that you want to do. So I became very, very interested in education, very interested in families, very interested in kids. And that's really what drives me. That's really been my passion based on my background and my own experience. So I came out to California after I graduated from Wellesley. I went to college with Hillary Clinton, but anyway. You can ask me about that later if you want. And I have a master's degree in education policy from which is another thing. This color, you know where that is. That's down in the peninsula. Anyway, yeah, you can hiss me. That's okay. But I'm teaching here, okay? And my 2 kids graduated from UCs. Anyway, I first served on the Oakland Board of Education. My children were in Oakland schools. My daughter went through all her flatline community schools, and the district was in a mess. And I spent a lot of time during those years trying to get more money for kids so that the kids wouldn't suffer, and also working on bilingual ed because the Oakland district was out of compliance on bilingual ed for years and years and years. So that's kind of how I got my start in politics. I decided after 1 term on the school board that I would run for the County Board of Supervisors. And what I did there was to get involved in children's issues again. The county is responsible for health care, is responsible for social services. and did a lot of kids programs. When a tobacco tax passed in 1998, I set up the first Children and Families Commission in the state of California to deal with young children 0 to 5. Because I learned, and all of you who've taken classes know, that brain development happens in the first 5 years of life. And really to push for those programs that would make our kids successful as they got older and eventually so that all of them could end up in an institution like this, would have the opportunity if that's what they wanted to do. I ran for the assembly in the year 2000. I was very fortunate to have been elected by my peers to become the first woman majority leader in the history of the California State Assembly. Majority leader, for those of you who don't know, is the second in command to the speaker. And because I was in a leadership position, I was able to have a great staff, a huge staff in the Capitol and down here, and to pass over 55 bills. But it's not just the number of bills. I was able to pass very substantive legislation that actually had a lot of opposition. I'm going to tell you about some of the bills I passed. I measure my success by my values, and also I think my job as a politician is to produce things for the people of California and produce people in the district. I get my satisfaction out of getting things done, and that's really fundamentally where I come from. You'll hear, it's been interesting, like I said, I've been out of Sacramento for a while, and a lot of times because of term limits, people can introduce 40 or 50 bills a year, and some of the bills don't make any sense, to tell you the truth. I think you have to look at what people introduce. We shouldn't waste taxpayer dollar. We should really focus on things that are really going to help people. One of the things that I was the most proud of when I was in Sacramento, for those of you who are around in 2004, was when the governor tried to close the doors to UC and CSU to 10,000 students. It was a budget cut. He said in that year, and I don't know if any of you were in that class, but he said that year if you were UC or CSU qualified, hey, I'm going to cut the budget, so instead of going there, you can go to community college for free. It caused a huge uproar in the state. And I went to the speaker and I led a struggle throughout the state of California. We set up websites, we set up protests, we set up hearings throughout every district. We did one huge one at the International House here, and we were able to overturn that because to me it was fundamentally unfair for people like yourselves who had worked so hard, done all the right things, and not be able to attend because the governor decided that he wanted to reverse the master plan. And I think the lesson of that for the state budget today is you have a legislator who wants to work with you, who can also organize outside of the Capitol, who can organize students to come up to Sacramento, who can organize letter writing campaigns and phone calls and the kind of actions that are needed. We can come up with positive change. Some of the bills that I'm most proud of have been in the area of toxics, healthcare, and education. I'm considered one of the leading authors in terms of environmental toxics in California. And I think you probably read in the newspaper, I hope none of you have those water bottles with the chemicals in it. Did you read about that? Yeah, I was the first person 3 years ago who held a hearing on bisphenol A. And I wasn't going after water bottles. I was going after bisphenol A in children's toys and baby toys because it makes plastic soft, and kids were chewing on this. And I was not able to get that bill passed when I was there, but I did fly in scientists from all over the country. And when I left, I worked with Fiona Ma, who's up there now, to pass that bill. I also passed a bill that now Denmark is looking at, and other states in the nation are looking at, to ban lead in water faucets. You all know about lead poisoning. That one we don't have to study anymore. Lead poisoning is irreversible. It causes brain damage in children and adults. And now, starting in 2010 in California, all faucets and new pipes in California will not have any lead in them because the lead leaches into the water. I passed a bill to remove toxics from furniture, like these kind of chairs here and rugs. In the future, California will not be able to use any of these type of chemicals. They're flame retardants, but there are safe alternatives. And these were bills that I had pages of opposition on from the chemical industry. And I fought really hard. I worked with people outside the building. I worked with my staff. We negotiated. It was very hard to do. In healthcare, I passed over approximately 15 to 20 bills to help consumers with healthcare. The bills that I'm the most proud of there was a bill to provide health insurance to all children in California. It's a crime. There's 1 million children in California that don't have health insurance. And how I got involved in that, as I said, my goal is to make sure that all of you and your sisters and brothers that are coming after you are able to learn and do well in school. Well, it's obvious if you're not healthy, you do poorly in school. The biggest cause of absenteeism in K through 12 is asthma, which is treatable. But we have kids in California who can't get treatment for asthma, who don't have inhalers, who when they get sick just go to the emergency room. I got this bill to the governor's desk and he vetoed it. But I want to continue to go back and fight for that because I think it's a crime that children in California don't have health insurance. After 4 years, I did get a bill signed that stops hospitals from overcharging uninsured patients. I don't know if you know this, but hospitals make their money off of people who go in without insurance. If you go in with insurance, you all have insurance because to enroll here you have to have it. But if you go into hospital and don't have insurance, they could charge you anything that they want for a broken leg or for something more serious. And people were going bankrupt because of this. And it took me 4 years fighting the hospital industry to get that bill signed. And now people will not have that problem and will not have to go bankrupt just because they need medical care. I worked with the speaker on a bill to extend health care coverage from parents to 26-year-olds. We weren't able to get that through. That's something I'd like to introduce again because I know when some of you get out of school and get jobs, you won't have jobs with health care. And it's very important. I know you think you're never going to die and never going to get sick, but hey, something could happen to you. And if you don't have health insurance, you could go broke and you could lose all your money. Some of the things I want to do when I return are continue to work on health care. I want to reintroduce the single-payer health care bill so that everyone in California will have health care. The efforts failed last year. I have 12 years of history working in health care, and this is something I'm very dedicated to. In education, I want to make sure that every school has a qualified teacher. There are 100,000 teachers that are retiring in California over the next 10 years. And I think all of you probably have a story about a good teacher. I don't think schools can improve without good teachers. And I hope many of you here will think about going into teaching. And what I want to do in that bill, I want to talk to you about what it would take for you to go into teaching. Could we forgive loans for the 5th year that you have to take those courses? Could we provide housing for you at a lower rate so that you can live in the communities where you teach? Right now, there's a big disincentive to go into teaching because we just don't pay enough, yet it's one of the most important jobs, I think, in the state of California. In terms of higher ed, I really want to work on continuing an accessible system for you. Not only fighting to continue to improve the UC budget, but making sure that the budget the UC has is spent on you guys and not spent on perks for administrators, is not spent on things that don't really help you. I would like to work on, as you know, I don't know how many of you have Cal Grants A or B. I want to make sure that that program is viable. I participated in an audit of that program in 2006. There were a lot of problems with it. We have to make sure that it's working well for you, that the money is being invested wisely, it's not being wasted, and that we continue to expand that program. And a new issue that I want to work on is, you know, this mortgage meltdown. I think most of you probably don't own houses. But I was reading the other day that this banking crisis has hurt a lot of the student loans, that many banks are no longer giving student loans. So it's not just people who own houses who are being hurt, it's students like yourself. And this is an issue I'm very, very concerned with, because we don't want college to become out of reach for people whose parents aren't millionaires, right? I mean, that is not the purpose of the public system in California. And lastly, I want to form a select committee on California families. There are so many disparities in California now. The rich are doing very well. The poor are not doing so very well. Middle class and poor people are not doing well. My significant other teaches at Merritt College, and he came home and he was heartbroken the other day because he has a student, and as you know, we're kind of at the end of a semester here, who had to quit his class because his father lost his job. He just got laid off because the economy is so bad. So this student had to go to work full time, and they had to sell their car. And you're reading in the paper today that people aren't able to pay their electricity bills. They're making very hard choices. I want to take a comprehensive look. No one in California has done this, at least not in recent history, at what is going on with California families. Who are they? And I don't mean just traditional families, all kinds of families. Who are they? Why are some people doing so much better than others? Why is it that someone who lives in West Oakland has a 15-year shorter lifespan than someone that lives in the Oakland Hills? I mean, that is just absolutely outrageous. So I will do hearings throughout the state. I conducted a select committee on children's health and school readiness for 6 years when I was in the assembly, so I'll use that as my model. We did hearings throughout the state. We worked with legislators in putting together a bill package because I don't have to carry all these bills myself. I'm very happy if other people carry them, so that we can really improve the situation for all families and all students in California. How much more time do I have? 3 minutes. Okay, so I really have a passion for this job. I hope that you will help me return to Sacramento. Like I said, I've been out for a year and a half, so I don't have the privilege of incumbency. But I have great support. I've been endorsed by your ASUC president. I've been endorsed by the SEIU unions, by NOW, National Organization of Women, League of Conservation Voters. We're working very hard every day. Ours is definitely a grassroots campaign. And besides that, in addition, I've been working on the Obama campaign since August. So Isela from my staff is over there. We have a clipboard, we have literature. I really need your help. And I hope very much to work with you, to talk to you, and to be able to return to Sacramento to fight for you and to make sure that you have everything you need to become the future leaders of this state. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's take your questions if you want to direct it for a particular speaker or in general. Let's go with, right here, from the class Republican will now ask her question. Okay, and the question is, racial preferences in education, what are your views for both speakers?
Well, if you mean affirmative action, actually, I am very much in favor of affirmative action, setting goals and timetables. I know that we can't do that in California anymore, so what we do is the outreach programs, and they are extraordinarily important, and I have fought every single year to keep those outreach programs, because every single year that I've been there, they've been threatened to be cut. And I have met kids, really wonderful kids in places like Richmond, where more than 50% of them drop out of high school without graduating. But I remember saying to some of the kids that were actually, a guy that was the president of his class at Richmond High School, "Are you going to go to Cal?" And he said, it was kind of sweet, he said, "Oh no." He said, "I'm doing very well, I'm getting all A's, but you know, I'll do badly on the SATs, and we don't have any advanced placement courses, so I could never go to Cal." Well, I think there's something to be said for giving some kids like that a leg up. The thing that got me was that he wasn't even angry. He was just sort of resigned. And what I would like to see is have us build more campuses of the university so that we can take 12% of an expanding population, and that we can actually help every young person who works hard, learns, and is able to go to Cal to come to Cal.
Well, as you know, we can't formally have quotas or use affirmative action in the state of California anymore, which I think I did not agree with Ward Connerly and what he did. I think that a great university like this, or all the schools in California, should look like the population. And I think if it doesn't look like the population, there are a number of reasons why. One is that I served on a school board, and some of the schools, frankly, in the urban areas just are not up to par. I mean, if you go to school in my district, if you went to school in Piedmont or you went to school in East Oakland, you would see a big difference in the quality of the school, the quality of the teacher, whether the textbooks were new or not. I think it's unfair. I think everyone should have an equal chance. In addition to that, I think that the UCs, and I fought very hard, we actually held the UC budget. I was on the Education Budget Committee for 5 years. We actually held up the UC budget a couple times because we wanted answers from them why it was that the number, particularly of Latino and African American students, had dropped so radically. And the answer couldn't have been that there weren't qualified students, because I don't know if you know this, but Stanford Law School has more African American and Latino students than Bolt, UCLA, and Davis combined. So our universities are sending out the wrong message to students, and I think that it's only fair that this campus should look like California.
Okay, right here on the aisle. Can you repeat the question?
She was asking about the bill on overcharging the uninsured. What it does is it sets a cap on what they can charge. There are different fees. You know, when you go in hospital, if you have insurance, you usually have an insurance called Medi-Cal, which is if you're low income, or you have Medicare if you're older or disabled, or you have your own insurance, or you have workers' comp. So what we did for the hospitals is we said that you could not charge any more than the higher of those three. So it makes a big difference. Just briefly, I'll just tell you a story. When I had that hearing on that bill, we had someone come in who went into the hospital and came out with a $400,000 medical bill. When they found out, actually at that time they had health insurance, so when they found out that they had health insurance, the bill was lowered to $75,000, which is still high, but they could manage that, they could get a loan and do it. But then the next year he had a recurring illness and he had to go back, and at that time he hadn't been working, so he lost his job, so he ended up with the $400,000. Now under my bill they'll never be able to do that again.
Some more questions? Right here in the front. Where do the candidates differ in their positions?
I think that anyone who runs for the Senate District 9 is going to have fairly similar voting records. This is a very Democratic district. It's a very liberal district. I think the main difference between Ms. Hancock and myself, we voted the same way on most stuff. There probably were some different votes. Is because I was in leadership and I was the majority leader, I believe I was more successful in getting bills passed in terms of numbers, but not just numbers, because we don't just want to look at numbers. We want to look at the quality of the bills. I had to really battle very hard. When you look at my bills, you can look them up on the website and you can see how we started out with the opposition of the hospitals, with the opposition of the chemical companies, with the faucet, the lead companies, to battle through all those type of bills. And I think this district needs someone who's very focused and who has the negotiation skills and the leadership position to get things done for this district. So that's how I would characterize the difference. My slogan is progressive and effective.
Thank you. I think there are a number of ways that you can separate us. One of them is our areas of interest. Ms. Chan has done some excellent legislation in the rather narrow field of toxics and health insurance. I have done a lot of legislation in natural resources, in education. I am the point person in the California State Legislature, truly, on this kind of career technical education that is, I believe, going to enable us to cut our 30% high school dropout rate, which is arguably one of the biggest impediments to the California economy growing and to stability and hope and opportunity in our inner cities. I want to keep those kids in school. I want to make sure that the jobs of the future are ready for them. I think that if you look on our websites, you'll also see that I have fought hard for legislation. It took me 3 years to get my toxics legislation through. The first year, everyone from the Building Industry Association to the Western States Petroleum Association was opposed to the bill. We kept going. We worked with every department and every state agency and every group, and we got a bill through last year that was signed by the governor that will make sure that no community, no low-income community, is going to be faced with a toxic waste cleanup and housing being built on a site that is going to be dangerous to the people who will live there. And I also am very proud of the depth and the diversity of my endorsements. Now, and the League of Conservation Voters have also endorsed me. Many groups have done dual endorsements. But I have 14 unions that have endorsed only me. Every Democratic mayor in Alameda County, except one who is neutral. And not only our great Congresswoman Barbara Lee, but Congressman George Miller from Contra Costa County and Congresswoman Ellen Tauscher from out in the valley. One of the exciting things about this whole process for me, and then of course Sandre Swanson, who's nested in the seat, who took Ms. Chan's place in the Assembly, is that there is a real opportunity to build a state, national, and local partnership here. I worked with the mayors of Oakland, Berkeley, Emeryville, and Richmond to set up what we're calling the Green Corridor. And we were able, in that Green Corridor, to have an agreement that we are going to start up businesses, and we are going to share not only business opportunities, but education opportunities. And the first thing that came out of that was SunPower, one of the largest solar manufacturers in California of solar panels, had to leave Berkeley because they outgrew their space. They were going to go to Nevada or overseas. We got them to move to the city of Richmond, into an old abandoned Ford Motor plant that had been vacant for a decade. And now, if we can start a Green Tech Academy and get that workforce of the future going too, it will be a great thing. So that's what I do. I collaborate with people. I work locally, and I look forward to working with all of you, because we got a lot to do, both in this part of the world and in terms of the big picture. Did you guys study this or something? Oh, okay. Oh, well, our resident election techie. Okay. You know, I opposed the bill that Governor Schwarzenegger had on the ballot. I am not opposed at all to redistricting reform, which would take it essentially out of the hands of the legislature into a more neutral body, if we could find a truly neutral body. But I don't think it's the be-all and end-all either, and I can give you a couple of reasons why. For one thing, when you actually study where people live in California, you realize that one of the problems with the Schwarzenegger plan is if you really wanted to have a competitive Republican-Democratic district, you would have had to start in San Francisco and have a sort of snake going right up through the foothills of the Sierras. Because guess what? This is a Democratic area. It's going to elect a liberal Democrat to the state legislature. So you would have to really torture boundaries to change very much. There are actually only about 5 or 6 party competitive seats in the state now, which you guys may know, which is probably way too little. But you probably couldn't get more than about another 10 maximum, I would say out of the 80 assembly seats. So it hasn't been an idea that seemed very, very exciting to me. Some of you may know I am very interested in public financing of elections, and am the author of AB 583, which would put in place in California a system similar to what is now in place in Arizona and in Maine, and a little bit in Connecticut, where it was adopted through legislation. But I could talk more about that if people are interested. That, in my opinion, is what will really level the playing field for people and ideas. But we have another redistricting proposal moving through, and it might be perfectly fine.
I guess if you studied this, I mean, for all of you, your students, you have to think about what's the goal of doing redistricting. You know, the goal, obviously, of doing any legislative reform should be to make the legislature work better. I mean, you don't just do it just to do it. So the goal would need to be to make the process more accountable to people and to strengthen the legislature. So in terms of that, I guess I would be open to a proposal. However, the proposal would have to be a fair one. The speaker had actually assigned me to a committee to look at that 2005 proposal, and we looked at other states in the country and what they had done, Texas and some other ones. And it always seems it's the opposing party that wants to do the redistricting because, you know, there's a political power fight, you know, around these things. And the reason why that proposal wasn't good is because it was going to give the power to 3 retired judges in California. The pool of retired judges in California, I think there's only like 1 or 2 Democrats. You know, they're all Republicans. So whatever proposal is done, if it has to be better, not worse. So the process has to be a fair one. Whoever does it, it has to be fair. And we don't want the state gerrymandered to diminish the power of people who've been disenfranchised in the past, particularly people of color who fought very hard to get into office. So I think I would support something as long as it was a fair process and it was an improvement over what we have now.
Well, let's talk. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, and then we'll come right back to you then. Go ahead.
Hillary was a young Republican. She was a Goldwater girl when she was in college. And she was very active on campus. She's always been very, very outspoken and very brilliant. And, you know, I'm a Democrat, so I support the Democratic nominee. I don't want to go into it too long. You didn't ask me. But the reason why I'm supporting Barack Obama, and I was an early endorser of his back in August, is because his ability to expand the electorate and bring in young people. The number of people in California and the nation who are voting is shrinking to a smaller and smaller percentage. This is really, to me, very bad for democracy in California, very bad in the nation. He's a brilliant man. I think he'd be a great president, and he's energized a whole generation of people, who I think need to be energized and leaders in the future.
Since the topic of financing of campaigns came up, what is it going to cost? What are you each going to raise for this seat, the primary and the general election, and then talk a little bit more about your public financing stances?
Well, I have taken the pledge in Proposition 36, yeah, that voluntarily limits expenditures, and that it's a huge amount of money, $724,000 for a Senate seat. I have accepted it. I will abide by it, and I will probably raise that amount, even though I got in this race relatively late and started way, way behind in the fundraising. But there was another part to your question. Oh, I was actually interested in election reform, talking about redistricting or, you know, other kinds of things. And that is, I'm a principal co-author with Senator Tom Torlakson in Contra Costa County this year of a constitutional amendment that would have California only require a 50% vote to pass a state budget. And believe me, if there was one thing we could do to increase accountability and transparency in state government, it would be to do that. The governor could still light item veto anything he wants, but at least you'd know you're getting a democratic budget if we could vote in a budget and send it to him. Last year, the budget was held up after he agreed to sign the budget that Republicans and Democrats had agreed on in the Assembly, was held up for another 6 weeks in the Senate looking for 2 votes, and the governor had to agree to blue pencil about $700 million more in order to get those 2 votes. And it is the tyranny of the minority, and that is one of the worst things, I think, for cynicism and lack of transparency. So we should talk about that, because I'd like to, that will have to go to signatures, but we are, because it takes a 2/3 vote to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot. But we are wanting to make sure that in this budget process, as you read about what will be cut and who will be hurt, to realize that we must get back to a 50% plus 1 budget like the U.S. Congress and every other state except 3.
Yeah, short response. Okay. I plan, this district has about 1 million voters in it, so I did not take the spending cap. I plan to spend about $900,000, and the reason I didn't is because I'm not in office. And when you're in office, you can use your office to promote yourself in terms of having forums, putting out literature. I did not have that advantage. So I felt that to win this race, to be able to reach voters, to be able to let them know who I am, that I would need to raise that amount of money. I did sign a pledge not to channel money through the Democratic Party. There's a big loophole there where you can go over the limits and you don't even know who's giving you money. It could be tobacco, it could be oil, whatever. I challenged Ms. Hancock to do that, and she chose not to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both. I hope you get involved in the campaign. No, sorry, we're out of time. So anyway, if you want to speak with our candidates, come on forward, and see you all next week. Thank you both.